Before you book your next Airbnb, remember this. The reviews don't tell you who still has a key. They don't tell you who's watching or who's already inside. Tonight, 3 people share terrifying experiences that turned ordinary vacations into nightmares. Stay until the final story, because what one 8-year-old saw outside his bedroom window still haunts the detective who responded. I'm Nightfall. Let's begin. There are jobs that take you places. Mine is one of them. I've worked in fields that have sent me across the country, across the ocean, Greece, Italy, remote corners of the northeastern United States that most people only ever see in photographs. And for the most part, the travel has been good to me. But there was one trip that I almost didn't survive. It started in the fall. My job sent me to the Adirondacks, a mountain region in upstate New York that, if you've never been, is almost impossible to describe with words. In autumn, the whole landscape transforms. The leaves go gold and red and deep amber, and the mountains look like something out of a painting, like something that shouldn't be real. Usually the company books a hotel. But this time I decided to do something different. I'd been grinding for months. I needed space. I needed quiet. I needed trees, open air, and absolutely nobody knocking on my door. So I went on Airbnb and I found it. The perfect place. A secluded cabin tucked into the trees. A back deck with a sweeping view down the side of the mountain. Trails right outside the door for morning runs. Everything I'd been picturing for months. I'm not going to name the woman who owned the property. You'll understand why before this story ends. I arrived on a Friday evening. My work obligations ran only in the late afternoon and early evening, which left me long stretches of time to myself. I got in, poured a drink, sat on the back deck, and watched the last of the daylight drain out of the mountains. It was perfect. I called it an early night and slept well. Saturday morning, I was up just after 6. I laced up my sneakers and hit the trails. And that's when it started. That feeling. Not a sound. Not something you see. Something you feel. That low, crawling certainty that somewhere behind you, just beyond where you can turn fast enough to catch it, something is watching. I told myself it was anxiety. I was a city person in the woods. Of course, my nervous system was going to overreact. I finished the jog, went inside, showered, and the noises started. Not dramatic noises, not crashing or banging, just sounds that didn't quite belong, subtle shifts, something settling that didn't need to settle, a presence in the quiet that I couldn't name and couldn't ignore. I told myself, it's a wooden cabin in the mountains. Cabins make noise. Stop it. I left for town around 3:30 to meet my coworkers. We handled our business, grabbed dinner, had a few drinks, and I kept finding reasons to stay out longer. I wasn't ready to go back to that cabin. The feeling from the morning jog was still sitting in the back of my skull. Something about that place felt off, and I couldn't explain it. Not in any way I was willing to say out loud. I even suggested an after-party at the cabin. My coworkers turned in just before 10. By 10:45, I was back on that mountain road, driving alone through the dark, repeating to myself, it's just a house. Houses make noise. You're safe. I checked every lock 3 times. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. For 2 hours, I drifted and startled. Every sound from outside pulled me back to the surface. I tried music. The music kept me awake. I turned it off. The sounds came back through the silence like they'd been waiting. A little after midnight, I made a decision. I was going to go downstairs, smoke a cigarette on the back deck, and seriously consider just packing my bag and driving home. I grabbed my coat, my phone, my cigarettes, and I walked to the top of the stairs. The staircase opened into the living room. Turn left at the bottom and you entered a long, open room. Dining area on one side, kitchen on the other. And at the far end, a sliding glass door leading to the back deck. I took one step into the dark, and something stopped me. In the kitchen. Something was wrong with the light. The moonlight coming through the window was broken, interrupted, like something was standing between the window and the wall, a shadow that didn't belong. I stood at the bottom of those stairs and I didn't breathe, and then I turned on the light. I want you to understand what I saw, because it's not something I've been able to unsee since that night. Standing in the kitchen, clear as anything, clear as you are right now, was a man, tall, easily 6 feet, long shaggy hair, a thick beard, late 30s. He was hunched slightly forward and he was staring directly at me. Neither of us moved. 10 seconds, 15, the kind of silence where you can hear your own pulse, and then he ran, full sprint, straight at me. The kitchen counter was the only thing between us. He had to go around it, and those 2 seconds, those 2 tiny seconds, were the only reason I made it out of that room. I turned and ran, back up the stairs, into the bedroom, slammed the door, threw the lock, pressed myself against the wall and called 911. I told them the address. I told them to hurry. The dispatcher stayed on the line, and then the door started coming apart. He wasn't knocking. He was striking the wood with a closed fist, over and over, rhythmic and relentless. And between each strike, he was saying things. He kept saying he loved her. He kept saying he had changed. He kept saying her name, and it wasn't mine. I started screaming back. I told him I didn't know him. I told him he had the wrong woman. I told him he needed to leave. It was like I wasn't there, like he couldn't hear me at all. He just kept coming. I watched the wood of the door start to split. I watched his fist push through, and then I heard the sirens, and then I heard the crash. The police came through the front door just as his hand was fully through the wood. I threw open the bedroom window and scrambled out onto the small roof below it. An officer helped me down. They had him in cuffs within 60 seconds. He kept screaming as they put him in the squad car, incoherent, inconsolable. It wasn't until they reached the owner of the property that anyone began to understand what had happened. This man was her ex-fiancé, mentally unraveling after a bad breakup. Nobody knew where he was, and then the police told me the part I still can't fully process. He had been living inside one of the closets of that cabin for days, beer cans, snack food, a makeshift setup. He had been there the entire time I was jogging those trails, the entire time I was hearing those sounds, the entire time I was telling myself it was just anxiety. He had a kitchen knife tucked into his belt loop when they arrested him. The detective told me quietly, almost as an aside, that I probably walked downstairs right as he was getting it. I checked those locks 3 times. It didn't matter, because he was already inside. If you're watching right now and you're not yet subscribed to Nightfall Narratives, I want to be straight with you. Most people who watch this content are not subscribed. And if that story made you feel something, there are 2 more coming that hit even harder. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to this channel. Before we move on, I have to ask you, if you had come downstairs in the dark and seen that shadow in the kitchen, what would you have done? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you thought story 1 was bad, the next guest opened his front door to someone who refused to leave. I'm not someone who scares easily. I want to be upfront about that because it matters for this story. I'm not dramatic. I don't rattle. So when I tell you that I almost didn't make it out of that Airbnb, I need you to understand that I genuinely didn't see it coming until I was standing in the doorway at 4 a.m, staring at a front door that was no longer fully closed. Let me back up. I had a job interview out of state, 5 hours from home. My fiancé set everything up, found the Airbnb, booked it, sent me all the details. The owner was friendly. He even offered to let me check in early so I could shower and decompress before the interview, instead of walking straight in from a 5-hour drive. That was a genuinely kind thing to do. The house was in a quiet neighborhood, nothing dramatic, nothing remote. Just a normal house on a normal street in a normal town. The interview went well. Or at least I convinced myself it did in the moment, before I spent the next 3 hours second-guessing every answer I gave. I came back to the house, grabbed some food, called my girl, put on a movie. The living room was the kind of space you could disappear into. Oversized wraparound couch, fireplace, massive TV, surround sound. I grabbed a blanket, threw on Endgame, and I was asleep within 15 minutes. I don't know how long I slept, but I know what woke me up. The doorbell. Once, I just laid there, thinking I was dreaming, thinking it was the movie. Then it rang again. I looked at my phone. 11:33 at night. My first instinct was to ignore it, but it rang again, and again. Something about the rhythm of it, 4 times, patient and evenly spaced, made something in my chest tighten in a way I couldn't name. I went to the window first, got low, looked out through the glass. A thin man, head down, holding a small brown paper bag in both hands, completely still, almost like he wasn't breathing. I went to the door, left the screen door shut between us. He didn't look up. In a flat, empty voice, he told me he had my pizza. I looked at the bag. That was not a pizza box. I told him he had the wrong address. Good night. I closed the door and turned back toward the living room. The doorbell rang again. I marched back, opened the door, and before I could say a word, same flat voice, same empty delivery. He had my pizza. He even recited the address of the house back to me. And while I was responding, his hand moved to the screen door handle, not aggressively, casually, like he expected it to open. I slammed the door, told him I was calling the police if he didn't leave. Then I crouched at the front window and watched. He stood on the porch for about a minute, not moving, not leaving, just standing there in the dark with that bag in his hands. Then he walked to his car, a beat-up red sedan with one broken headlight. He got in. I felt the tension leave my shoulders. I went to the kitchen, got something to eat, tried to decompress. And then I saw the light. Through the front window, that single headlight, still burning, still in the driveway, engine running. I went upstairs to get a better angle. He was still there, car running, not moving. I made my mistake. I decided not to call the police. I convinced myself it wasn't serious enough. I put my shoes on and walked outside. When I got to the driver's side window, the car was empty. Nobody there. Engine running. Door shut. I turned around and ran back inside so fast I don't even remember crossing the yard. Every lock I could find. The door. The chain at the top. I went upstairs and I did not come back down. I tried to message the owner of the house, no response. I stayed on the floor of that bedroom until 4 in the morning. At 4, I got up, grabbed my things and went downstairs. The front door was unlocked. Not just unlocked, slightly open. A 1/4 inch. The chain was the only thing keeping it from swinging free. I stood there and my brain tried to give me an out. Maybe I forgot to lock it when I ran inside. Maybe. But I knew. And I knew I hadn't locked the screen door when I ran back in. The screen door that this man had already reached for. I went to my car at a near sprint as the sun started to come up. And as I was backing out of the driveway, I saw it. The brown paper bag, still sitting on the porch, right where the front steps met the railing. I didn't stop to open it. I drove to the end of the street, and at the last house on the block, in a run-down green house with overgrown grass, there was a red sedan in the driveway, one broken headlight. I messaged the owner from the road and told him everything. The man at the door, the car, the bag, the unlocked door, the car at the end of the street. He started typing. I watched the dots appear, and then they disappeared. He never responded. When I looked up that property recently, it's no longer listed on Airbnb. I don't know what was in that bag. I don't know what would have happened if that chain hadn't caught the door. I don't know what this man wanted, or how long he sat at the end of that street, watching the house go quiet. And honestly, I think that's the version of this story I need to keep telling myself. What do you think he was doing when he left that car? because I have a theory. And I want to know if you see it the same way I do. Tell me in the comments. We have one more story, and I'll be honest with you. This is the one that stayed with me longest after I finished writing it, because this one didn't happen to a solo traveler. It didn't happen to someone alone. It happened to a family, with children, and it started with an 8-year-old boy seeing shadows in the backyard, shadows that waved at him. I want to say something before I tell this story. Monsters are real, not the kind that drift through walls, not the kind that live under beds, the kind that wear regular faces, the kind that drive regular cars and look like ordinary people until the moment they decide you're a target. My family learned that the hard way last summer, and I'm not sure they've fully come back from it. We took a family vacation, nothing elaborate. My wife and I, our 8-year-old son, and our 13-year-old daughter, a few nights near the ocean. We found a house on Airbnb, not right on the water, but a 5-minute walk, half the price, and tucked at the end of a dead-end street with a creek running along the back of the property. Private, quiet, it felt safe. That first afternoon was perfect. We hit the beach as soon as we arrived. The kids got along. My son and my daughter, who fight about everything, were building sandcastles together and laughing. It felt like everything a family vacation is supposed to feel like. That was the last time the trip felt that way. We got to the house around 5, cooked dinner, played cards until the kids fell asleep. I slept deeply that first night. One of those complete heavy sleeps where you feel the whole week leaving your body. My son did not sleep. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw him at breakfast. He sat there barely touching his food, looking like a child who had watched something he couldn't explain and didn't know how to say out loud. I had to pull it out of him slowly. He said he saw ghosts in the backyard. I want you to set aside what that sounds like for a second, because what he was actually describing was this: shadows. Moving in the yard. Several of them. Coming close to the back of the house, lingering near the door, then pulling back into the trees before disappearing toward the creek. He said one of them turned around and waved at him. He was in tears while he told me. We walked him through it. Told him it was animals. Told him it was the wind moving through the trees. Told him he was safe. He believed us. By the time we hit the beach that afternoon, he was back to himself. That evening, we came back to the house and I noticed the front door was unlocked. My wife wasn't sure if she'd locked it when we left. I walked every room. Nothing was out of place. Nothing missing. I let it go. The kids went to bed around 10. My wife and I stayed up a little longer. I was relaxed. I thought the worst of it was behind us. A knock at our bedroom door just before midnight. My son, trembling so hard he could barely hold himself upright. He said the ghosts were back. I got up and checked every window. Nothing in the yard. Nothing at the tree line. The backyard floodlight was on. But that could be triggered by anything. I kept asking him to show me. He was too scared to go near the glass. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he told me the rest. One of the shadows had tapped on his bedroom window, and it had spoken to him through the glass. It told him that if he screamed, it would hurt his entire family. He asked it to leave him alone. It told him it would leave if he opened the door. Instead of opening the door, he came to get us. My 8-year-old son, alone in the dark, someone outside his window telling him to open the door, and he made the right call. That night he slept between us. I felt him shaking for hours. The next morning I suggested a family campout in the living room, all of us together, fort made of cushions, family sleepover. My son's face when I said it was the one good moment left in that trip. We fell asleep on the floor sometime after midnight. At 2:30 in the morning, my son shook me awake. He said, "They're outside again." I sat up and turned toward the sliding glass door at the back of the house. At first, I thought the reflections on the glass were playing tricks on me. Then one of them moved. 3 figures were standing perfectly still just beyond the sliding door, dressed in all black, head to toe, and wearing masks. Not Halloween masks. White-eyed masks with round, bulging lenses that caught the ambient light in a way that made them look almost inhuman. Like something designed, specifically, to terrify. I made a sound I'd never made before. Some involuntary noise that woke my wife and daughter before I could say a word. My wife saw the masks and started screaming. My daughter screamed. My son buried himself into the blankets. One of the figures moved toward the door. I watched the handle shift as he tried to slide it open. It was locked. My daughter, 13 years old, faster than any of us, grabbed her phone and called 911. I picked up a walking stick that had been left inside the house and walked toward the glass. I knew it was useless if they had real weapons. I knew that. But I had my wife and 2 children behind me, and I was going to stand between them and those masks for as long as I was standing. The figures didn't leave. They stayed right there at the glass, looking at each other, looking back at us, taunting, deliberate, like they were enjoying every second of what they were doing to my family. Then the one on the left pulled out a knife and slowly waved it back and forth. My family screamed in a way I will hear for the rest of my life. And then, the figure on the far right was tackled to the ground. The police had come through the backyard silently. The other 2 ran. They didn't get far. 3 men in cuffs within 90 seconds. When I saw their faces under those masks, that almost scared me more. 3 young men, 20, and 18. Normal faces. The kind of faces you walk past without remembering. All 3 of them were carrying knives. Not just the one who showed his. All 3. The detective I spoke with afterward told me what the local police already knew. There was a group in that area that specifically targeted tourists and rental properties. They focused on families with children. More cash, they assumed, and easier to frighten into compliance. The detective said it with the kind of flat, practiced calm that told me this was not the first call like this he had taken. The police said they probably only wanted money. They said they likely wouldn't have physically harmed us if they'd gotten through that door. I think about that every time I try to believe it. Nobody knows what 3 men with knives would have done to a family in the dark if that glass door had been open. Some questions don't have answers. Some answers are better left where they belong, in the dark. Before you go, I want to ask you one last thing. At what point in that story would you have packed your family into the car and left? When the son came to you the first night? When the door was found unlocked? When he told you someone spoke to him through the glass? Tell me in the comments, because that question says a lot about how we each respond when the danger is slow and invisible. And if you've made it this far, thank you, genuinely. Most people watching this right now are not subscribed to Nightfall narratives. If these stories kept you locked in, if the tension felt real, if you found yourself holding your breath at any point tonight, this channel belongs in your feed. Subscribe, turn on notifications, because the stories don't stop, and neither do we. Tonight, before you go to bed, check every lock, then check them again. Because sometimes, the danger isn't trying to get in. It's already inside. I'm Nightfall. I'll see you in the next story.